In this video, I'm be covering cold email deliverability insights that we've gotten from monitoring 75,000 plus inboxes. This video is in collaboration with Scaled Mail, Dean Fiacco at Scaled Mail. They offer a inbox service, so a lot of this data comes from them. We don't own 75,000 inboxes ourselves, so this is a mix between us and them. But this is a really important video because deliverability is such a pain point for so many teams that are running outbound. A lot of people are just completely firing in the dark, have absolutely no idea what's really happening, and if something goes wrong, they actually don't know the reason why. So in this video, I'm gonna be covering that. If you don't know who I am, I'm Christian Placencia, the co-founder at RevGrowth. Just to show you, we know what we're talking about. You can check out our website. We have a ton of case studies, but got a bunch of campaign case studies here. Generated 743 leads, 260 leads from 58,000 contact, 163, so on and so forth. You can check them out on our website. They're all there. So a quick snapshot of this doc. Main bullet points you need to know. First things we offer first. So if you have a phenomenal offer, honestly, you can kind of get away with making deliverability mistakes in terms of infrastructure and best practices. If your offer really sucks, you can have everything in place. You can have the right email accounts, the right infrastructure, but if the offer sucks, the infrastructure is eventually going to burn because you're getting no replies. And the way these ESPs monitor your inboxes is as if it's a feedback loop. So if they see that you're consistently getting negative feedback from responses, then they're going to identify you as a spammer, and it's a downward spiral. So if you have a low reply rate, it's going to probably get worse over time unless you create a new offer or campaign angle. Next thing, you always want to diversify, because you never know with Google, Microsoft, SMTP, or whatever other inboxes they're using. You never know what could happen, right? So in the space, Google or Microsoft typically has some sort of black swan event every like 6 to 12 months minimum, where there's a new update where full tenants are wiped out, or just deliverability becomes worse for either of the providers. So you want to make sure that you're not fully leveraged on one of these providers. From my experience though, I have seen that Google is typically more consistent in terms of not running into these catastrophic issues. I have seen that Microsoft has been more finicky in general. This is just my experience. Other people could have different experiences, but just wanted to note that. So if you were to go with one provider, I would go with Google. Next thing is going to be, so Microsoft and Google, there's different practices that you need to implement for each of them to avoid any sort of spam filters. I'm going to dive into that further, but like I said, I'd say Microsoft has a much stronger like AI spam filter than Google does. I'll dive into that a bit in the video. And then really short copy works on Outlook specifically. Again, I'm going to dive into that. But yeah, things like age, IP pool, volume, these things matter, which again I'm gonna go through. If you want inboxes, I highly recommend checking out Scaled Mail. Again, they helped us get a lot of data for this video, so definitely go check them out. They're our main provider. We love them. Their team is phenomenal. Not just the inboxes themselves, but the team that actually works with us on the inboxes is phenomenal. If you ever run into any issues, they'll fix it. Man, especially if you're running a high volume operation, you need a really good inbox partner and infrastructure partner that's going to be there if you ever run into issues. Because managing all yourself, especially if you're not a go-to-market agency or a lead gen agency or whatever, it's a lot to manage. So having a really good partner is important. If you want to get 10% off, you can use our code outbound code 10 off for 10% off Scaled Mail email packages, and that's like a recurring 10% off. So yeah, again, massive shout out to Dean Fiacco. Check him out on LinkedIn. I don't think he's on YouTube, but yeah, go to his LinkedIn. I guess that's where he posts the most. He's also on Twitter too. So core delivery levers, I'm going to go through these. So number one is going to be, like your reputation, specifically like your domain reputation. So with Google, this is a lot more important. Like I'm talking about the domain that you actually use for the email accounts that you use. That domain reputation is important. And when you send with Google, you want to make sure that you have a minimum of 2 weeks of aging for that domain before sending. This is something that, again, it's specific to Google, whereas with Microsoft, you don't need as much of a domain reputation. It's more of like your IP. So if you have an IP where you've sent millions of cold emails from, and you've had a really bad time doing so, you consistently are having like a sub 1% reply rate, and you're getting marked as spam, email accounts are burning all the time, your IP reputation is probably pretty bad. So if you set up any future Microsoft inboxes on that same IP, you're probably going to have a low reply rate. So just keep that in mind. Whereas with Google, really you need that domain reputation. IP isn't as important, but it's still going to be important, of course. Also, Outlook has a really strong content filter. So what I mean by content is the actual text that's within the email. So that's another thing to keep in mind, which there's going to be more I mention about that later. Warm up. So again, warm up with Google is essential. You have to warm up minimum 2 weeks for sure. Again, this kind of plays into the domain aging factor, but having letting the domain age plus also building that reputation with warm up is really going to give you the best shot for, getting a high reply rate on Google. Whereas Microsoft, again, domain age doesn't really matter as much. I still recommend doing it. We always, no matter what, do 2 weeks warm up, even like 3 to 4 weeks sometimes. So we always want to make sure that, we just want to do everything we can to be as safe as possible. I'm not going to risk it for whatever reason if I don't need to, right? Yeah, and something you do, of course, warm up. So like set up a warm up pool. We use Emo Bison. You can use Instantly, Smartly. They're all good. You don't need to worry about it. Copy sensitivity. So this is actually really, really important. With Google, they're a bit more lenient from what we've seen. So you can kind of like you can get away with using words like free and sales. Sometimes you obviously can't spam it, but we've seen that like you don't have to be super strict with it. Whereas if we're using Microsoft and also for targeting Microsoft inboxes, it's very, very cutthroat because as I mentioned, their AI spam filter is very, very strong compared to Microsoft or compared to Google. So really it's a lot more difficult inboxing into Microsoft inboxes, also sending from them. So really, like, I think if you go to mailmeteor.com, they have a list of all the spam words. I think it's like 800 spam words. What you could do is, well, actually, there's a spam checker. Just search for spam checker on Google, and you can run your email copy through that, and it will identify the spam words. If you know you're sending from Microsoft and sending to Microsoft, that's something you want to definitely do. Yeah, so with Microsoft, you really want to keep the emails looking super like an email you would send to a coworker instead of a cold sales email. So what this kind of looks like, a very short email for sure, less than 40 words. No tacky greeting, no overcomplicated signature. Definitely don't add unsubscribe, because if you add unsubscribe, then it's obviously a cold email, right? And just like get straight to the point, right? Make it a very simple email. In terms of volume per mailbox. So what that's going to look like for Google. So Google and Microsoft, when we're talking about Microsoft, we're actually talking about Microsoft Azure inboxes, which has a much different setup than Google, which I'll dive into later, but it's a much different setup. So this is going to look kind of weird, but essentially with Google per domain, we're only going to set up 1 to 2 inboxes. Whereas with Microsoft, we're going to set up like 25 to 50 inboxes per domain. So it's a much different setup. And that's why the daily sending volume is much lower. So Google, we typically push around that 20 emails per day range. 50 is really, really pushing it. I wouldn't recommend that. But yeah, once your warm up is complete, you can push 20 cold emails per day from your boxes. And you don't really want to send more than 50 emails per day between cold and warm from Google. And then with Microsoft, if you're using the Azure setup, you really only want to send 2 to 5 emails per day. Going beyond that, we've just seen that deliverability falls off significantly for Microsoft. Microsoft is very finicky, and once deliverability tanks, it's very hard to recover. So you have to scrap it, restart it, all that. So one thing to keep in mind when you're looking at your daily sending volume is you want to ramp it up. So you don't want to start at like 20 per day. You really want to start with like 5 or 10 per day, or only start with like 1 email per day. And what you want to do to sort of determine if you want to go further, like push volume higher, is actually looking at how people are responding. So if you're getting a consistently good reply rate, people are responding to your emails positively, then you can start like pushing up the ramp up volume. But the thing is, the last thing you want to do is scale a losing campaign. So you don't want to scale a campaign that is getting really bad feedback, because that's going to be a guaranteed way you're going to burn your inboxes. So that's another thing you want to keep in mind. ESP matching. So there's mixed feedback on ESP matching. Really, it's like a small difference in terms of performance if you do ESP matching. Some people say you shouldn't do it. Some people say you have to do it. I say honestly, from my experience, it doesn't really matter too much. The only case where I've seen ESP matching really makes a difference is sending from Google to Google. That's where, we've gotten the highest reply rate. Well, I'd say, or my recommendation is just test it and see what works well for you. But I would say it's not really the most important thing, in my opinion. And for key error codes, these are actually very important. So specifically with Microsoft, if you see this error code when you're getting bounce backs from emails, that means your emails are actually shadow banned. And that's because the content in the email itself, Microsoft is identifying as being a cold email, which in that case, it's not sending the email at all. And that's why you'll see like no bounces and no reply rate. Because in a lot of cases, people think like if you have a really high bounce rate, that means you're not inboxing. But you can actually have 0 bounce rate, have a really good bounce rate, and still be not inboxing because you're not even sending emails in the first place. With this, I mean, this is general like high spam rate with Google, but yeah, with Microsoft, this specific IP code means your emails are just not even being sent in the first place. So that's something very important to keep in mind. And the way you want to do that, you have to reach out to Microsoft support which is kind of pain, which the scale mail team does for you and can fix that issue. So just work with scaled mail, it makes it a lot easier. In terms of infrastructure, so there's a few ways you can approach this. In terms of the ESP mix, so depending on the industry you're going after, well, first let me say, like, just doing a 50-50 mix is just the safest option in most cases. But with specific industries, sometimes having a different ratio or allotment of ESPs could make sense. So for example, when you're targeting industries that are going to be primarily on enterprise infrastructure, using more Microsoft can actually be beneficial versus Google, because Microsoft is just, for whatever reasons, it's better at getting through these enterprise infrastructures. Whereas for, more small to medium-sized businesses and e-com, where they're using Google for the most part, leveraging yourself in Google is typically better. But in most cases, for most industries, doing 50-50 is a safe bet. So that works. In terms of domains, you don't really have to get this granular, but really all you need to know is get a domain warm enough for 2 weeks. Depending on if you're using Google or Microsoft, the inbox allotment is going to be different. So for Google, you want to do 3 inboxes per domain maximum. And then for Outlook, it's going to be, if you're doing the Azure setup, it's going to be 25 inboxes per domain. And this is if you're using scaled mail. If you're setting up traditional Outlook inboxes, then you want to do the same setup as Google. But I recommend using the Azure inboxes that scaled mail provides over typical Outlook inboxes. In terms of warm up, so you want to make sure you're doing 1.3 to 2x. I'd recommend 2x, the warm sending volume versus cold volume. So this is how many warm emails you're sending versus cold emails. So for example, if you're sending 10 cold emails, you want to make sure you're sending 20 warm emails at the same time. That's the general ratio you want to do. Warm up, I recommend doing the same thing for Outlook too, like doing a 2x. So if you're sending 5 cold emails, you're going to send 10 warm emails from Outlook. And then you can use tools like Warmy. It's like a premium warm pool. You don't have to do that. It's because it's honestly pretty expensive, but that's an option. If you're doing low volume outreach, I mean, it could be worth it for you. In terms of health monitoring, so great tools can be EmailGuard and MailReach for testing if you're inboxing on Google inboxes or Microsoft inboxes. So the way that works, you connect an email inbox or a few email inboxes to EmailGuard or MailReach. They'll send some mock emails to their own Google or Microsoft inboxes, and they'll then run a score. So let's say they have 5 Google inboxes and 5 Microsoft inboxes that they're going to test sending emails to from your inbox. From that, you'll get a score. So let's say you score 5 out of 5 on Google, but only 3 out of 5 on Microsoft. In that case, you'd have an 8 out of 10. And if you have anything below an 8 out of 10, then likely you're running into some issues. But the thing is, an important thing to look at is what's the inboxing rate on Google versus Microsoft. So let's say for Google, as I just mentioned, you're 5 out of 5. That means you're perfect on Google. But when you're saying in Microsoft, let's say you're like 0 out of 5. In that case, you know that if you send to Microsoft, you're probably going to land spam. Whereas if you send to Google, you're going to inbox. In that case, what you might want to do is when you create any future campaigns with those inboxes you're sending from, you might want to remove all Microsoft inboxes. So you can use tools like EmailGuard to remove any of the Microsoft inboxes that your prospects are using and only send to Google, which can really that can 10x your reply rate if you do this. Oh yeah, so this is an important one too. This is going back to the copy, since Outlook has a really strict AI spam filter. So if you're landing 10 out of 10, but you're just getting no replies. By the way, reply rate is a really good gauge of deliverability. If you're below a 1% reply rate, you're probably running into some sort of deliverability issues. But let's say you run the test, you're 10 out of 10, but you're getting 0 replies. You're for sure shadow banned. So what you want to do is you want to adjust the copy, make sure you remove all the spam words, test a lot of different variants. And if nothing changes, then you might want to just get new infrastructure. But yeah, that's something very important to keep in mind, specifically with Outlook. And then again, when it comes to the IP, you want to make sure you have that. And then just work with scaled mail. Doing this yourself is a massive pain. I just work with scaled mail. Easy move. And again, if you ever run into any deliverability issues, you just want to swap them. You don't want to try to revive them or anything. So if you're sending for a week or two and nothing's changing, you still have a really low reply rate, then you should just scrap and replace. And again, the scaled mail team does this for you. Turnaround time is typically 48 hours, so they get it going pretty fast. In terms of, so this is not you don't have to follow this exactly, but this is technically deliverability best practices. In terms of email copy, subject line, I mean, just don't add in, keep it really short. This applies for both. Just keep it really short. You can spin tax all that. In terms of Outlook, you want to keep the emails really short. This is just what we've seen performs the best. A very, very short email, just one singular question. The shorter, around 15 words is better. But so example, just super, super quick. This is obviously not a good email, but something short like that. For Google, they can be a bit longer. Again, I mean, you can write a 15-word email for Google and it works, but ideally, like, less than 70 words and you're good. This is really a lot stricter with Outlook. Like, for sure, you want it under 40 words, like very, very short. Google, you can be a bit more lenient. CTA, I mean, this doesn't really, always just keep it light. If you, especially with Outlook, again, you don't want to be pitching for a call immediately. You want to keep the CTA very soft and just you're poking a question as if, you're asking a coworker or something. I recommend the same thing with Google because that's just like the typical campaign format that works the best. This is pretty interesting. So with signatures, sometimes adding a lot of text to your signature can actually be detrimental. Again, especially with Outlook. So don't add your title, don't add your phone number, all this stuff. You can do this, but we've seen tests where if you have a really long signature with all this information, it can actually hurt deliverability. So you can have a signature where it's literally just sincerely Christian. And that's it. You don't have to add the title and all that stuff. Google, this doesn't really matter. You can do whatever you want. Of course, never add any images and don't use HubSpot signature, things like that. The opt-out, you never want to add unsubscribe. You never want to do that because when the spam filters are reading your emails and it says unsubscribe in it, if you're sending an email to a coworker, you're never adding unsubscribe to that. No normal human being is writing unsubscribe in their email unless if it's a cold email. So if you want the alternative to this, if you want to have some sort of unsubscribe function, is by just writing a line saying hey, just respond with peanut and I'll stop emailing you or whatever, or just something simple like this. Just let me know and I'll drop this. Right? Just have a phrase instead of unsubscribe directly. In terms of spin tags, since we're doing really short lines with Outlook, it's ideally best you have AI generate the entire sentence. So you just have more uniqueness at scale versus spin tags. Whereas with Google, I mean, you don't really need to do that. Obviously, the more unique each email is, the better. But I'd say it's just more important with Outlook. Follow-ups. So we don't do any follow-up. It doesn't really matter Google or Outlook, but I wouldn't recommend doing any follow-up with Outlook. Google, you could do a follow-up, but we keep our email strategy is a little bit different. Our goal is to reach our entire client's TAM every 30 to 90 days. And with that, we just don't really send any follow-up. We want to maximize new contacts. But if you want to send follow-up, which I recommend honestly just doing new touch points. You can with Google, but Microsoft, I wouldn't really recommend doing it. All right, we're back. Had to tend to my babies real quick. So if you hear any baby noise in the background, it's because of them. But anyway, so in terms of a diagnostics flow chart when it comes to deliverability. So first indicator is going to be just all right, is your reply rate down or are you getting really high bounces? If you check open rate, is open rate down? Pretty simple to identify whether something is going wrong or not just off that. From there, if you see that there is just 0 open, 0 bounces, most likely you're getting a shadow ban from Outlook. Your emails are just not being sent. And what you can do is, again, test with Email Guard. If it sees 10 out of 10, you need to rewrite the copy because it's going to be a content issue. It's not really an infrastructure issue. Next thing is checking for this IP issue. If you see this, you need to make the support ticket, which again, doing that is a pain. So just work with Scaled Mail. And if you see your Gmail inboxes are underperforming, it's likely going to be a spam issue. So in that case, what you do is reduce volume, maybe test more messaging and then continue on warm up. If it's still not good, then you probably want to replace them. Now, in terms of what you can do to set up a phenomenal infrastructure today, what you want to do first is go to scaledmail.com, go buy one of their packages. You can determine what your inbox split you want to do. If you're into 50-50, 70 Google, 30% Microsoft, you determine that. They have packages for each of them and they will set that up for you. Buy domains, you don't need to do this. Scaled Mail will do that. And then if you want, you can, wait 30 days before launch. At least do 2 weeks and you're fine. You don't need to do this. Scaled Mail does this done for you. If you want to do this yourself, you have to create a tenant, do 1-2 Outlook domains, blah, blah. It's a lot of work. Just use Scaled Mail. Start Gmail warm up. Use Email Bison. If you're using Scaled Mail Smart Leader instantly, you can set up the warm up on there as well. You can do this for Outlook as well. You don't have to do it just for Gmail, of course. If you're going to launch campaigns, you want to make sure that your Outlook emails are very short, whereas Google, they can still be short, but they can also be a little longer if you want. Make sure you're using spin tags. Don't use super long signatures. Definitely don't use unsubscribes. Just monitor inboxes daily, especially in high volume. This is a lot of work, and that's why you work with people like us who can do this for you. Review Email Guard. So run a weekly email test. That's best practice. So make sure that your score for your inbox is above 8 out of 10. If it's below that, then you're going to need to go ahead and probably swap those inboxes out. Test your copy. If you have a bad campaign, testing copy first before assuming that it's an inbox issue. And then always keep offers fresh. You'll always, be testing new offers and testing new copy. And then, once you're getting above a 1% reply rate consistently and you're getting consistent positive replies, then you can decide to scale up those campaigns. So that's the video. I hope you found this valuable. This is a lot of work. Deliverability is a big pain. So that is something that we manage for you guys, and we help set up these systems at very high scale. So at our company RevGrowth, our mission is to help reach our clients' TAM within 90 days, like quarterly basis or faster. Like really, our goal is to set a very high volume outbound system. You set up systems starting from 100,000 emails per month to million plus. So if you're looking to do high volume cold email outbound, we are your go-to people. We'll set up all this for you. You don't have to worry about all this. It's a pain. It's a lot of work. And also managing it is it's a whole operation that requires a team of people to manage. So if that's something that you're interested in, if you're looking to hyperscale your cold email outbound in 2026, book a call below. Actually, you'll fill out an application form and then book a call with us if you are a fit. We are offering a free campaign for people who are a fit. We work with B2B companies, primarily above 3 million ARR, and also have maybe a few salespeople. But fill out the application form, and then we can decide if we're a fit. You'll hop on a call with me directly, and we'll talk. But if you're not looking for any of that, go to scaledmail.com, set up inboxes, do your own thing. And if you're running your own outbound, they're a great option. So I highly recommend them. Again, hope you found this video valuable, and I'll see you in the next one.